Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. In the spirit of the trees, in the spirit of living nature, of which we are a part, with deep gratitude to all of our ancestors and all the generations before us that have brought us to the present moment, I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising. Since we have been airing these global broadcasts from spring of 2020, Humanity Rising has been accentuating challenges that are confronting the human race, challenges from climate, challenges from war, challenges to our health, economics, politics, culture, with a view of enabling people everywhere to look honestly at the obstacles to human growth and development, and to come together in a way that humanity, even under present duress, can rise together with more abundance and more vitality and with a deeper alignment with natural systems. For the 2 years that we've been navigating through the turbulence of COVID, the issues of mental health, psychological health, emotional health, physical health have been paramount. Because COVID has been global, the data that has emerged is that virtually everywhere in the world, these indicators are becoming more acute. 2 years of lockdowns and social distancing and mask wearing, and now war in the UK and shootings in the United States, climate change, code red, are having a deleterious effect on the very capacity that we have to maintain optimism, to maintain resilience, to maintain our sense of courage and fortitude as we face an increasingly turbulent external environment. And globally, the group that seems to have suffered the most have been our young people. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the statistics. Suicide is the number one killer of young people. Shootings in the United States, 60% of young people feel that we're somehow doomed when they think of the escalating climate turbulence. So this week on Humanity Rising, we want to focus in an honest and transparent way on our young people, on the mental health, psychological, and emotional challenges that they face in our world. And we're very privileged to have as our partner in convening this 5-day program, Naomi Weiss, who's the director of Connecting the Dots, who will be participating and will be introduced in a few minutes. But it's the movie Connecting the Dots that she directed and produced that probably more than any other single thing has brought this issue to global attention. And one of the things I wanted to suggest to all of us as we embark on this 5-day program is that in addition to listening to these 5 days, that we all take the time to watch the documentary, which I have done, because many of the young people who will be appearing on the programs over the week were also featured in the documentary. And it would enhance all of our empathy, I would say, our understanding and our sense of what we now must do if, in addition to the Humanity Rising broadcast, we would all support the documentary by watching it. So we're going to make that available. And as soon as we finish our Heart Coherence centering, which we'll do in a moment now, we're going to air a trailer from the documentary. And then after we view the trailer, I will introduce our moderator for the program today. So that's our week. This is the issue. It could not be more important because the young carry our future. And if the young are under duress, we as parents, we as a society, morally are obligated to do everything that we can, both to understand what they're going through and to work with them, to empower them so that they can navigate through a very complicated world with the kind of strength and equilibrium of spirit and soul and heart that they need to prosper. One of the ways that you can do it every day is just by taking a moment, which we're going to do right now. And in all the hustle and bustle of our world, just relax into your body. And close your eyes if you can. And center yourself on your heart. And for the next moment, attune yourself to your heartbeat in a spirit of gratitude and thanksgiving. And for the next minute, just commune with all the young people you know and send love, send support, and send strength. Thank you, everyone. And now, Georg, if you'll play the trailer, that will commence our program, at the conclusion of which I'll introduce our moderator.
Do people know what mental health is? Do people know what mental illness is?
Every single one of you in here that's battling, every one of you that feels like you're alone, every one of you who feels like nobody understands you, how many of you relate to what I'm talking about? Raise your hand.
There should be some kind of a system that talks about mental health problems in schools, like in lessons, just anywhere really.
They're having to deal with a lot of very, very ill people rather than it being more about prevention.
Youth mental health, it's the same story everywhere I go.
I want to get to the root of it and to really figure out the why from the mouth and the stories of young people.
I can sometimes feel a panic attack. Like I woke up this morning and I knew for a fact I was gonna have a panic attack. I'm taking this because I think if I look in my face, it'll calm me down.
I don't even see myself alive after high school.
People need to hear the truth that most kids our age are not fine.
I never saw myself represented anywhere. I felt like it was very invisible. Not only being a woman, but a Black Muslim woman, I just thought that those problems were for everybody except people like me.
I don't want other young people to feel the way I did growing up. Finally, I have a chance to fight the system.
I think we need to start hearing from young people like myself when making policies related to somebody's mental health.
There are so many things inherent to a space when you build it up properly that help people become more resilient and help people find community. When you make sure a space is safe, where you make sure that everybody feels welcome into a space, people feel like they can be themselves.
I'm telling my story. It's literally making something painful inside beautiful.
So sick of being unhappy because I'm so young, and I feel like I need to be able to experience the world in a positive, healthy way.
I just wanted to be accepted for who I am, and I just wanted to be loved.
It took me 5 years to finally open up about my mental illness, but it wasn't as scary as I thought. It was one of the best things I've ever done.
Young people have to know that even though at times they may feel that they're in the darkness, if they could just know just to hold on, that light is going to come over the horizon.
The minute we start talking about mental illness, then people will not be ashamed.
I just really hope the world could change.
Thank you, everyone. Powerful documentary that I encourage all of you to view if you can during this week, because it will bring a dimensionality to our deliberations that will fill you with appreciation. I want to now introduce Michaela Harley. She is a youth activist in all these matters. She was involved with the mental health and substance use system. She also works for Frame and has dedicated her life to empowering young people around the world to take control of their lives, to work through these mental and psychological and emotional challenges in a way that is empowering to both themselves, but also to their families and to the community of young people with which they're in association. So Michaela, I want to thank you for everything that you've done in your very short, dynamic life, and welcome you to Humanity Rising. And I turn the program now over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jim. What a beautiful welcoming. I want to take a moment to welcome everyone. And as mentioned, my name's Michaela Harley. I'm calling in from Cornwall, Ontario, which is located on the unceded territory of the Haudenosaunee, Mohawk, and Huron-Wendat. I'm grateful to be here and grateful to share this space with you. As Jim had already kindly mentioned, I'm a youth who has been impacted personally by mental health, as someone who's accessed the system, as someone who supported my father with his mental health and addiction challenges, you know, as a student in this world and as a professional in the field. So I'm really beyond excited to be here, to share the space, to engage in reflections. It's going to be a really phenomenal week. As mentioned, throughout this 5-day event, we will have a variety of keynotes, panel discussions, partner events that will focus on building connections and leading change. Today, we will be focusing on the state of global youth mental health. Then tomorrow, the topic is belonging and community, all around creating safer spaces. Moving right along on Wednesday, the focus is on gender and questioning. Following this, on Thursday, there will be important conversations around environmental anxiety as it relates to youth mental health. Then to close this week, we will be talking about parenting and youth mental health on Friday. We hope to see you there at all of the events throughout the week. Trust me, this is not something that you want to miss, but as a reminder, if you do miss a session, not to worry. It's my understanding that they are recorded for reviewing later, so you will have access. But let's dive in. So today we are focused on a critical conversation about the state of global youth mental health. In this discussion, we have leaders in the youth mental health space speaking up, and it is time to listen. As you may already know, the world has alarmingly and increasingly have these increased rates of youth anxiety, depression, and suicide. And youth mental health and the contributing factors have become a real crisis, one that I've experienced both as a youth who struggled and as a caregiver. With this in mind, today's session sets the stage for the week, touching on some of the contributing factors and potential solutions in support of youth mental health globally. You can find out more online, but I will begin with some brief introductions on the amazing folks joining us today. So to start, we have the wonderful Angel Richards, who is a singer-songwriter from Ajax, Ontario, Canada. Let me give you a bit of background. Angel decided when she turned 18 that she needed to make her mental health a top priority. After years of suffering with depression and anxiety and learning how to cope with past traumas, she now uses her music as a way to escape and to heal and to inspire others. Angel is currently studying social work, and her aim is to learn how to help those in crisis through shedding more light on the reality of living with a mental illness. Next, we're also sharing space with Finity Royal, who is a medical student and international mountain runner passionate about creating change within the healthcare system so that young people have the absolute best chance of reaching their potential. Finty is one of the youth in the film, connecting the dots, and who has the hope that more young people can be empowered to talk about mental health. We're also joined by Noemi Weiss, who is an award-winning writer, director, and producer, and who has spent over 20 years telling stories on the big and small screens, including, but not limited to, Connecting the Dots, the trailer we just watched. Fun fact, she has been honored with an invitation to meet Pope Francis at the Vatican in recognition of the impact her films have created globally in communities. We're also joined by the lovely Donna Volpita, an outstanding individual with many global roles, including being the founder and education director of Pathways to Empower. In her role, Donna makes the brain science of building resiliency, fostering mental wellness, and developing leadership easy to understand and easy to apply. And finally, we are also joined by Tom Eddington, who's the author, executive coach, and business advisor, as well as executive producer of Connecting the Dots. As a scholar of conscious leadership, he is passionate about bringing more conscious leadership into the world, what she does through his coaching and advisory work, film and media projects, and board positions. Okay, so as you can see, we have an amazing panel lined up today, and thank you everyone on the panel for dedicating your time to this. Let's jump right in. And first, Donna, I wonder if you would feel comfortable sharing a little bit more about the work that you do to set the stage.
I would love to. Thank you so much. And thank you all for inviting me to participate in this. This is, an area of passion for me. I've been talking about mental health for a very long time. And I come at it from a perspective of brain science, of that we need to understand our brains and be able to talk about them in a way that is easy. I'm an educator by trade. I was a teacher for many years working with youth, and realized when I had kids of my own that I did not know much about the brain, that I had a doctoral degree in education and not one class on brain science. So that seemed kind of silly to me. So I created a model to help people understand how our brains naturally respond to challenge so that we can understand how to build resilience and foster our mental wellness. And I'm going to share that model right now and do sort of a 3-minute overview so that people can have sort of an idea of why we're seeing this increase in mental health issues and how our brains respond so that we can begin to understand how we can foster our own mental wellness. So this is the resilient mindset model. As you can see, it's really easy, which is the fun part about it. There are 3 parts to the model. The first is the 4S framework, or the 4 S's of resilience that you can see in the dragonfly's wings, We say that our resilience is our response to any challenge, good, bad, big, or small. And that resilience is based on the way we think about these 4 S's. So self, who am I? What do I stand for? What are my strengths and weaknesses? Everything I think about myself. The second is situation. How do I take that challenge and put it into perspective and break it down into its doable parts? Third is supports. Who and what do I go to for help if I'm having problems handling that challenge? And finally, strategies. What are the things that I do to handle that challenge? The interesting part is that the reality of those 4 S's doesn't really matter. It has to do with the brain pathways that we've created around them. So I could have 50 supports to go to, but if I don't think I have those supports, I won't access them, so they don't matter. So the good news about that is that we can use these 4 S's as a framework to prepare for, handle, and reflect on any challenge, good, bad, big, or small. And the way our brains work is that every time we do that, we're actually proactively building more resilient brain pathways. So if I'm working with a kid on the playground and he's trying to get across the monkey bars, I can use these as a framework to help. And instead of doing things for our kids, we can actually say to them, you know what? What are the supports you can go to? What are the strategies? Is your strategy working? It's not. Do you have another one? Is there somebody else you can ask for help? What did you learn about yourself through this? And when we do that scaffolding, we're literally firing neurons in the brain that are building more resilient brain pathways. So the second part of the model is the 4 characters. And they help us understand how our brain is wired to respond to those challenges. So we think of decisions that we make as good versus bad, but actually our brains don't think that way. Our brains don't think in good, bad. Our brains think in long-term versus short-term. So there's a part of our brain that's represented by the ant that's in charge of our long-term decisions. Things like putting money in the bank, going to the doctor, studying for the test, finishing that project, the things we don't really feel like doing right now, but we do them because they'll benefit us in the long run. The ant holds the tools of a healthy brain. When we have these tools in place, we are better able to make those long-term decisions when they'll benefit us, and we're better able to foster our mental wellness. So these are the things that help us to keep our mental wellness in check. The grasshopper represents the limbic system. That's the part of our brain in charge of the here and now. Grasshopper doesn't really care if you put money in the bank or finish that project. Kind of wants to eat Cheetos and watch Netflix. So we all understand that grasshopper, that I want to do it now. It's the part of the brain that when Netflix says your next one starts in 3, 2, 1, your grasshopper saying, yeah, we can do that. We can do one more. It's all right. So all of those social media companies, Netflix and the YouTube, all of those understand this. That's why they have that 3, 2, 1. So the grasshopper's in charge of the here and now, always looking out for reward, but is also in charge of our survival. So it's where we get a lot of neurochemicals. We say that neurochemicals are like text messages that drive our behavior. It tells our brain what to do. And so when we see a car coming towards us, we get a burst of cortisol and we get a burst of adrenaline that gets us out of the way. So this is the grasshopper going into fight, flight, or freeze. If we didn't do that, we'd never get out of the way of that oncoming car. So the grasshopper's in charge of our survival. Grasshopper also gets neurochemicals when we work really hard towards a goal and we struggle and we work and we finally succeed and we get that yes feeling. So we get a burst of things like serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine that are really important for the health of the brain. So we always say that this version of the grasshopper represents the fact that self-esteem isn't a gift we can give someone. It's a neurochemical response we rob them of when we don't let them struggle towards success. So it's really important that we get those opportunities to work hard and struggle. One of the things is our society right now is very much about let's get it now, let's do it immediately. So we don't get that struggle as much. So that's important to recognize. The glowworm represents the amygdala. Our brain's main job is survival. So there's a part of our brain always on the lookout for threat. That's the glowworm. When the glowworm sees that car coming towards us, it's its job to go red alert, switch control of the brain from the ant to the grasshopper, go into fight, flight, or freeze, and get us out of the way of the oncoming car. What a lot of people don't realize is that the glowworm responds the same way to social threats as it does to physical threats. So the third part of the model is at the bottom, reacts, which is an acronym for the social threats to the brain. So just like that car coming towards us made the glowworm go red alert, if we have a threat to respect, equity, alliances, control, territory, or similarity, our brain will also go red alert, switch control of the brain from the ant to the grasshopper, put us into fight, flight, or freeze, and we say and do things that aren't necessarily in our best long-term interest. The dragonfly's job is override, understanding what's happening and being able to say, you know what? We don't need to go fight, flight, or freeze. We got this. We have these 4 S's in place. We know how to handle this situation. We often say that fight, flight, or freeze roughly translates to violence, anxiety, and depression. The opposite of those is action, is knowing how to handle the situation, is having those 4 S's so that we feel like we have that control and we can handle that situation. So as you can see, this is a lot of brain science in something that is very relatable. So what we think is most powerful about this model is that it gives people a very non-judgmental language to talk about what's happening. My favorite story is when my youngest was 6 when I was developing the model. And one day I was mad at him, he was mad at me. And I went to talk to him and he said, "Mom, I can't talk to you right now. I'm in grasshopper mode." And it's a very non-judgmental way to be able to understand what is happening and why we're responding the way we are. One of the things, last thing I want to point out is that control is often a trigger associated with trauma. And we've all just gone through the pandemic. And so a lot of what's happening, control has become a much greater trigger for a lot of us, because when we experience trauma, the glowworm gets stronger and the dragonfly gets weaker. It's just a natural response to the brain because we want to be able to remember this, because the main job of the brain is survival. So a lot of the way we're responding is because our grasshopper has been triggered so much and our glowworm has been triggered so much that it is stronger and our dragonflies are getting weaker. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. So sorry that was long-winded, but it's a lot of background for this discussion.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Donna, thank you so much for sharing all of that. As someone who's studied neuroscience in university, freaking out over this, I'm excited to deep dive personally more into it. It's incredible. As you were speaking about the resilience mindset model and the 4 S's, you know, I heard themes of brain pathways and neurotransmitters, empowerment, mental wellness, and the importance of struggling to build that resiliency, among other things, all critical in the conversation about the state of global youth mental health. I have to say, I also really loved the use of dragonflies and glowworms and grasshoppers and ants as visuals to help understand the model. I want to also acknowledge that there are some really important reflections in the chat going on right now that I think are going to be really interesting as we carry forward this conversation around the importance of, you know, external factors in our outside world, such as the pandemic, politics, things like that, affecting our well-being, our brain structures, etc. So I think what an important and dynamic conversation happening and reflections going on in the chat. To you know, our other panelists, I would be really curious if anyone has any reflections relating to the work that Donna has shared, the model, the components, as it relates to your own stories or your own work. Yeah, I'll open the floor, no pressure if either way, but that was something that was coming to mind as I was listening.
If I could just speak on that, I was actually fascinated. I feel like the glowworm was how I had lived my life up until I was about maybe like 17. And it's because, so growing up, I was going in a very like abusive situation. I was truly in that fight or flight like all the time. And it's crazy what that does. And I do know that when parents are doing that around their kids, it does change your brain. And I think something clicked for me when I felt like I couldn't rely on my own feelings and emotions because it was kind of like sullied with all these bad learned behaviors and, things I had heard growing up. So I relied on facts, like the fact that you could change your brain. And that to me that's the bit of control that I could get back. So what could I do to even just make my brain healthier? What kind of patterns could I start or habits could I start developing to, it's almost like working out the brain. Like, and I am learning in school a bit more about the connections and the pathways that you can help strengthen. And I believe it was the dragonfly. It resonated with me, the self part on the wing, because that's where the shift happened. I felt like I was understanding a bit more about that, what it would be like to practice that dragonfly area of the model. It was very interesting for me, that whole model. But it's interesting because I have seen, and that's a change that happened in me. I've seen how you build self-esteem through these accomplishments. And sometimes it's the tiniest step, like filming Connecting the Dots was that step for me, thinking, I felt like I have nothing to lose. Let me share my story. I had heard that giving meaning to your pain, can help, because at least sometimes when you have nothing you feel like you're not getting anything, the best thing is to give what maybe you don't have. And I was thinking, if I've gone through all this, maybe if I can just tell my story, if that's my purpose, then, then let's work with that. And it was just that little step that showed me, so I can do this. Maybe I can have some type of impact, and I can take control a bit over how I exist in this world and what my story will mean. And it's interesting because that I can testament to that model is so true. And I've seen it. It's interesting to learn about it because I believe that knowledge is power. And I think that was the switch in me, actually looking at the science of it and not just my emotions at the time.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that reflection, Angel. That was wonderful. And I can totally, even in my own life too, I totally resonate with what you're saying about kind of that glowworm to the dragonfly and all of the shifts. So I resonate for sure. Cindy, Tom, Noemi, anything coming to mind for you folks?
I think that this simplified model is really good in terms of sort of the prevention of everything, because a lot of the work I do is trying to get sort of young people to be able to build emotional toolkits so they can learn to deal with their emotions as they're growing up, rather than getting to a crisis point when they're a teenager and everything's all happening at once and they don't know how to deal with the whatever they're feeling. So I think it's really great. And before this, I'd never seen this model before, and I think it's really good because it makes it kind of palatable for young people, so they can take it through with them throughout their lives. So yeah, because I think it's really important that schools should be teaching about mental health, because they spend, so at primary school, when I was up until 10, every week we'd have fire drills that took 30 minutes, and they could really be spending that time on teaching young children about mental health. So yeah.
One thing that I think is so important, Finty, I love that comment, because we need to begin to teach people early. And now we have a way to do that. And interestingly, everybody relates to the characters. People look and say, oh, it's for little kids. But the truth is that every adult I know, and when we're in that emotional state, it helps us understand why we are in that state. It gives us sort of this, oh, this is why this is happening. It's not just that I'm really emotional or whatever, that this is why my brain is doing this for survival. So it helps us understand how we can have an impact on that. And Nomi, I just think the movie is so phenomenal And the way I see it, I see it as such a partnership, that there are so many pieces to this puzzle, and that having, time and again, we hear in the movie how kids would love to be able to talk about this and love to be able to be educated. So this can open a discussion that if we can give people the language and the information to have those conversations, I think it would really have such a critical impact.
It seems like the model was such a digestible way for people to talk about mental health. I think the conversation can sometimes be intimidating and maybe even just a bit hard to understand when you get into the science part of it. It was really digestible. And I think the lack of knowledge about it made it so much easier for youth, and especially from my experience, to blame themselves and think something's just wrong with me, because it does feel like it's a lot of emotions, but your brain is communicating with you. It's telling you that something is going on, something needs to be maybe worked on, and it's not a issue with you, your personality, or anything like that. And I think it's the perfect segue or just dark path into thoughts about suicide, because it's that self-hate and that feeling of hopelessness that it just makes it so easy to slip into that mindset and that desire, from what I've experienced. So knowledge is so important.
If I may, I was talking with the mic on mute before. I realized I had to unmute myself, but I want to thank everybody, number one, for being here. I'm delighted to share this panel with all of you, and to have my ambassadors of the film with me, Angel and Finti, today. It's quite moving. I see you grow, because it's been a number of years that we've been connected through the film, and I see you talking, and honestly, I feel like a proud mom right now. I've got goosebumps as I hear you and expressing yourself and being on the other side of the mountain right now. So I'm very proud. I'm really very proud, and sharing this space with all of you is fantastic. So thank you so much for all the kind words. Donna, I think that what you just show right now, it's quite amazing, because when we talk about mental health, and from my experience, not as a professional, but really as a true observer, which is my objective looking at any of the situations that I get involved with my films, and learn all the aspects that could happen to affect this situation. When we talk about mental health, and we talk about physical health, we keep on talking about the fact that we need to talk about health all at once and understand both and how both relate. So when I met Donna and I learned about what has been doing and what she just shared with us, I thought this is the same connection as mental and physical health. How do we put it all together so we actually can make it one and understand how to manage our emotions better? Because if we know where they are coming from, we are able to understand it better and react better and act in a different way. And this explanation that is so, at layman term, absolutely for everybody, for all ages. Me as a mother, as a grandmother, I take words every time that I hear it, and I think I'm gonna use it with my little ones. I'm gonna use it with my grandchildren. We don't learn, and I'm going to use it with myself as well. I think that there's a lot of self-reflection that goes into all of this. With the young people, as the main mission of the film is that we don't talk about them without them. So if they are able to understand this, and we are able to teach them, like Finti was saying, like Donna was agreeing, and all of us, I think, in this panel agree, that if we start from the very beginning and they understand this kind of language, then we will be able to have them as part of the conversation, and they will be able to express their feelings in a different way, in a way that will be open to all of us, that we will be able to have a dialogue instead of a fight, that our communications will be more friendly, and that it will bring us all together in a way that that depression, that anxiety, that stigma that we've been trying to avoid for so long will slowly dissipate. So thank you, Donna, for working on this and making it accessible for all of us to talk about and to hopefully bring it into more schools and more parents, more homes.
I'd like to just jump in and pick up on what Nomi was just sharing, but also Finty's comment. And so, there's been a fundamental lack of understanding about mental health, and there's been the stigma around it. And for me, getting involved in the film was to help remove the stigma and the power of the film, especially through the voices of the youth who were in the film. But, picking up on Finty's comment, we do the fire drills and, all of the time spent on the fire drills, which is about the physical safety of the children. But there's never been that awareness and concern about the mental health of our youth. And so I love that the film has the opportunity to remove that stigma. Donna, your model is beautiful in helping create some understanding. And so if there were a way for school administrators, for teachers to understand the importance of the mental health and to spend as much time on the mental health as the physical health. And then our guest tomorrow, Dr. Lisa Miller, is going to talk about the role that spirituality can play in supporting our youth as well.
I will say that there is progress being made. I started talking about this probably 12 years ago. And I had a lot of blank stares when I went to schools and said, we need to start talking about mental health. We need to understand the brain. We need to, and I'm very excited that this Friday, we'll be presenting at Mental Health America with the state of Michigan. And Michigan is doing some stuff that I've never seen before. They've put together something called the BHLC, Behavioral Health Learning Collaborative, and it is truly a blueprint for comprehensive, equitable behavioral health statewide. And we're presenting about it with them, and states are beginning to recognize the importance. We had federal funding in the United States about that. And the BHLC is a model that can go internationally as well. We've spoken to a lot of organizations about putting together something like that. And there's progress. It's slow, people are afraid, but there's progress.
And to that point, the connection with the film, and excuse the pan, but we are really connecting the dots here. We talked about how bringing the film to schools and opening up the discussion, which the film is totally about emotions. Each one of the participants talks about emotions and call to action as well, combined with this technical part and this physical part that Donna talks about, really brings the full picture together. That's why it was so important to start the week with this conversation, because I think that they are the basics of it all. We cannot talk about mental health if we don't understand the basics and the roots of it. And then, of course, this will give us the language to be able to talk about prevention and talk about what can we do next, but really opening up the conversation, because that's what the film has been used as a tool and continues to be used as a tool in schools and in community screenings for the last year. And we've been in all continents with much success, seeing that the discussions that happen after hosting a screening is what actually is making a difference. And proudly to say that there's implementation of changes as a result. But if we were able to present both, this is what we are aiming at, right? And that's what I think it will really bring the information to the deeper level, particularly to the parents groups, particularly to the teachers as well. We've got to start from the top in that sense to go down to the kids so they can understand it. But if I may, I would love to have Finty talk about her tools and Angel as well, because they have found, each one of them, very interesting tools to deal with. So Maybe you can explain a little bit about what you're doing, that it might be an inspiration to everyone.
I wasn't sure if Finty wanted to speak because she had some interesting talk about the toolkit. I'd love to hear from her if she's.
All right, okay.
I'll just piggyback.
So for me, I'm a mountain runner. I represent England for mountain running, and I started mountain running. So I had an eating disorder, and one of my motivations for getting better was like being able to run again. And then I found fell running or mountain running, and I feel like it's something that just really grounds me, because I have this whole analogy about mountain climbing, because like when I'm at the start, you see this mountain in front of you and it's this massive big thing that's overwhelming to look up at, but then to overcome it, I just stay in the present moment and kind of just take one step at a time, because as long as I keep moving, I'm going to get there eventually, like even if I'm really slow. And I feel like it's the same with recovering from something really hard like a mental illness, because it's overwhelming to look at the end goal, but small steps and changes over time lead to really big results. And then also, as you get higher and higher, everything gets smaller and smaller at the ground level. So all these issues that seemed really big when you were at the bottom gradually get smaller and smaller. So it really puts everything into perspective. And I think that kind of letting your muscles do the work whilst your brain's kind of resting, it brings like this calm that's really hard to find in the demands of our society today. And I always think that in times of lots of change and ever-changing civilization, the mountains are always going to be there for me. So it's like a constant in my life. My running is a constant that I have to fall back on when things get tough. And then you've also got the aspect of like, you might get lost when you're out in the mountains sometimes, and that's why you need to take a map and compass. And I see it as like my friends and family being my map and compass, because they're there to guide me if I get lost. So yeah, that's kind of my analogy around the whole mountain climbing.
I thought that was beautiful. It's so simple. I remember when I started to think like that and compare, like, what is it that gives me joy or is fulfilling, and then think about what is behind that, behind just the act of, say, like you climbing the mountain, but what is it doing? Why does it make me feel so good? Why is, like thinking it's a holistic approach, it seems like. And that was a big shift for me. I feel like I could not climb a mountain. I personally could not do it, but I know that for me, that's music. So it was that thing that I could always fall back on. And our hobbies may differ, but it seems like what it is it's something that's so authentic to the individual. And it's something that if someone finds what gives them peace, then it kind of insulates you, it seems like. And no matter what's going on around you, you can find that thing that you can go back to. It gives you that stability in your life, because stability is so important. And the life is so busy right now. And from what I've experienced, life is so busy. And I know that as youth too, like things are getting so competitive in the world, and it's adding to just that anxiety. And so I think everyone needs to find something that gives them a pause. And it's interesting with the mountain climbing, a takeaway I get from you sharing that is like a reminder that physical health is so important too. Even exercising, even if it's not mountain climbing, exercising is so good for it will change the way you feel. And it's not just mental and then physical, it's together. Your brain is a part of your body at the end of the day, and it's so connected. And I always say that mental health is just as important as physical health, and they are so much more connected than I think we ever recognized before. I think touching a bit before on what Noemi was talking about starting from the top, and you as well with the teachers, just educating kids, like I'm so inspired, and I still get emotional when I hear adults talking about mental health, because I'm still young. I'm turning 21 this year, but about 10 years ago, I was told, don't talk about that. And it was not recognized at all. I was having panic attacks, like from as early as 6 years old and no one knew what was going on. They would like laugh in my face. It was not a conversation. And now we are the future, as everyone always says, and we do look up to the adults. And that has been the biggest shift for me, is seeing adults recognize the challenges of youth. Like it really helped me, and it's so validating. And since we are the future, us talking about this, now us having the knowledge, the generation to come is going to start off on such a better base. And I'm so excited for it. And I've learned from this whole experience of being connected in this conversation that talking about it has so much power. I always felt defeated. Like, how do we actually make social change? And the answer is truly talking about it, because it opens it up. And then we can start thinking about, okay, how do we do that? And I think the tools and resources makes the difference between living a meaningful life and like not living one at all. This is very interesting to me.
If I can add to that, what Angel was saying, I've been saying all along that, yes, you guys are the future, but I think we have to think about the present, and we have to think about all of you as the present. The future will come. It's just like the mountain that Finti was talking about. If we are constantly thinking about you guys and the youth in general as the future, we are losing the moment, and we've got to think about you all as the present. You have to be part of the conversation. We should not be talking about you without you. You should be part of that conversation at any given moment, anywhere in the world. So consider yourselves that, and that's why talking about it. And sorry, that's my phone connected to my computer, and I couldn't stop it. So thinking about you in the moment and being part of this is why we are having this type of conversations. That's what the film mission has been part of and continues to be part of it. Let's talk about it together, and let's not make any decisions without you. That's what validates you. But in order to do that, we need the tools to be educated. And what Donna is doing is educating the parents who might not understand, the teachers who might not understand, and the young kids too, that might not understand what's happening to them, and then grow as young adults in a better way.
I think that's so awesome. And I think this film is a fantastic way to begin that conversation and then have the tools to continue it with understanding what's happening. One of the things, and I love saying that, yes, youth are the future, but we need to deal with this now. We've got to start this. We've got to start these conversations. We've got, it is unfortunately incredibly predictable, the increase in violence that we're seeing. And one of the things that I like to say to people is that just like being over 65 or being older is a risk factor for the physical health ailments of COVID, being an adolescent, by virtue of where they are in brain development, puts them at greater risk for mental health issues associated with COVID, because everything about COVID and our response went against what is necessary for the adolescent brain. And I have 4 adolescents right now. So through COVID, I kept saying to my husband, whose idea was it to have 4 teenagers? Because my oldest just turned 20. And throughout, I've often said to them, we have to look at the different layers. We've got the genetic aspect. We've got the trauma aspect in terms of experiences that you have. We've got the idea of being an adolescent. And by virtue of where you are, that's such a traumatic time. It's up and down. It's a very difficult time for the brain because it's going through such a transformation. And then you've got the idea of doing that during COVID. There's so much that we can understand about people's responses. And there was a comment in the chat that said, we also have to look at some of this is a natural response to what has happened. And we've pathologize it, or whatever that word is. And we can't do that. We have to recognize that this is the way we are wired to respond because we want to survive.
Donna, could you talk about what you're seeing in the classroom when youth are shared, the model is shared in the classroom. And Angel and Finty, I'd love to hear what the experience was like for you when you participated in the film, and how it affected the way you saw yourself and how it affected your relationships with your classmates.
So we launched our organization in January of 2020, and our first thing that we did was create a guidebook for teaching mental health literacy, and I presented that for the first time on March 6th of 2020. So everything shut down right after that conference. So we switched to online programming, and our first program was a college course called Thriving Through College, and it was an online course that the head of health and wellness at SUNY Oswego came to us and said, would you create a course for my students? And we're like, sure, we'll do that. She offered it. It wasn't required. It was offered in the fall of 2020. So when everything was online and nobody wanted to go to their computer again, she offered this as an additional course. They didn't have to do it. We had a 95% completion rate and a 98% recommendation rate. And the biggest piece of feedback that we got was, why didn't somebody teach us this earlier? They were ticked off. They were so angry. And we constantly get that from people. We're like, why didn't anybody tell us this?
Yep, I would have had the same approach. And anytime someone talked about it, I was like, thank you. Like, thank you, because it was nowhere else when you probably needed it the most. And if I was, especially I think with the online, because it was so like isolating, we were literally in isolation and quarantine. It just, you were kind of too trapped, and what an important time to talk about it. And I can see why they benefit from that so much. And I would have, especially school is stressful enough, I think. It's school stressful enough. So that's very helpful.
I think for me, when COVID hit, I just finished my A-levels. So I was like having a gap year before uni. So I kind of, it's a bit controversial, but COVID for me was really good in helping me develop as a person, because that's when I really, really took the time to understand myself and take part in all these things that I'd kind of been put off doing before because they were in person and far away, whereas everything was online. So I took part in so much stuff like volunteering, public speaking, all throughout COVID. And I'd say that was the time that I really, truly learned the most about myself. So I guess that's a different perspective on COVID.
I remember I was scared. Because I took a year off before going to post-secondary as well. And I was nervous because I had just figured out how I learn, and then it had been switched. But for someone with depression, it actually helped my attendance being online, because I would have missed so many more days if it was in person. So I guess it's about making the most out of it, but just also understanding that, like, okay, I still need to get out. It's still good for me to, see the sun, and it's healthy to get out. I don't believe that's how we're supposed to live all the time, but making the most of the situation for sure.
Well, looking at the good of adversity, I say, after 3.5 years for me working on this film, I was faced with a pandemic, and I panicked at first, saying, what am I going to do now? Like, I finished the film, and now what? I cannot take it to a theater. I cannot take it to a festival. I cannot do anything with it. So I think that to the point of how the brain works, in that mode, you have to react and find a solution. And for me, the solution was create partnerships and go virtual and invite the world to it. And we were very fortunate to have the government of Canada, UNICEF, Harvard Mental Health, Origin from Global, Frame from Canada, and so many other partners that joined me and said, yes, we're going to do this together. Mm-hmm. So we reached over 50 countries when we launched the film, and I would never have been able to do it if I was under normal circumstances going into my Canadian premiere or my US premiere one at a time. That I think that it's very important to recognize how we can take the best out of each moment, right? And that's part of the anxiety, depression, and everything else that we go through on a daily basis. What do we do to be able to overcome? And what's that resilience that you were talking about, Donna, as well? How our brain functions to say in this moment, I have to come up with a solution right away. And we are very efficient as human beings. We do have a way to come through with this. And if there's people around us that are willing to help us, the better, because we do need a community. We cannot do it alone. We need to connect one another. We need to help one another. We need to support that initiative that someone would have and validate that. Of course, because I had to be validated. I mean, it was not that easy of saying I got all these partners. No, each one had to watch the film and make sure that it was okay with their mandate, was okay with their mission, was okay with everything else, and pass that test. So you could think, no, it was easy. She went and no, nothing was easy. Everything had a step, and you have to follow that, and you have to learn from that. That yes, you have patience, you sit back, you've done the best that you could, and now let's the other decide, and hopefully they can join you. They can join you in that dream that you have, because that's what I do. I produce dreams. If they join me in my dream, then they will support everyone who trusted me with those stories in this particular case. So I think that is that community feeling that is what we need, and that connection of everything. Nothing is independent, not the physical, not the mental, not us alone. Is all of it, right? It's a group.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I've appreciated all of these reflections thus far. And I really resonate with also bringing COVID, the context of COVID into this conversation, because I think that has truly transformed our life, transformed mental health, substance use as well. And I would be curious to know from folks who had participated in the film, what back whenever it was first being created, what were the motivations to make the film, or what prompted you to participate in the film? And when COVID hit, and we were seeing, the crisis that was always there, but more in the forefront with COVID, did it kind of further resonate your either, motivation to make the film or motivation to participate?
I will let the girls talk first.
Oh, I was going to say, ironically enough, I think even though it was released during the pandemic, it was almost like perfect timing. I feel like it created the perfect floor for that film to be released, actually, because I feel like more than ever, everybody could relate to it. But I remember what prompted me to participate is that, honestly, I was at an all-time low, and I had just started working on acceptance, because I feel like that's the number one. You have to accept, because you can't change what you don't acknowledge. And I was learning about that. So I was performing with this charity, and I honestly was still struggling with that, because music is it's very emotionally charged for me. And they had asked me about, would you want to participate in this? And honestly, I didn't really even understand truly what it was. I didn't understand the gravity of what I was walking into, but I was like, yeah, because I had started understanding that I should share my story. If there's nothing else, at the time, it felt like if there's nothing else I have to live for, let's just do this. Maybe if it'll help somebody else. So that was my motivation for joining it. Turns out it was an amazing move that changed my life. But I also, before I forget, I want to mention, it seemed like even overcoming this pandemic, and hopefully we can all take this away from it, that is evidence. And I guess scientifically it would be talking about resilience and building that self-esteem, but overcoming things, even just little things, it kind of gives you evidence. Like when you feel like you can't make it through the day, you can kind of look back and say, well, I made it through a pandemic. Or for me, it's kind of started with little things like, well, I did get up and even wash that dish if that's all I could do that day. And it's evidence. And it if you think that's just where you're going to plateau, even just accepting it, because it's not true, but accepting that maybe this is all I can do, and then turns out you can do more and more. So it was, even doing that film was evidence to me actually that, okay, I can have some agency in my life. Someone wrote in the chat about agency, and I thought it was so true. And those things proved to me actually that I can have some control here.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying there about, I feel like you've kind of got to sometimes modify your targets, because I'm someone who's a perfectionist. I always have big goals, and it's like I'm never, some of them it's just like it kind of gets me down that when I just can't achieve them because I just can't. So it's kind of about modifying your goals day to day based on how you feel. But yeah, in terms of the documentary, I got involved because I was a volunteer on 7 Cups of Tea, like the helpline, and I don't know, I think I just got asked whether I wanted to be part of this documentary, and I was like, well, why not? So yeah, that's how I got involved.
I think that the roles that Angel and Finty play in the film independently are very important, because Finty talks mostly about prevention, and it's because it has been something that really has bothered her, and she brought it up today again. How can we prevent? How can we do this before it's too late? And I think it's important that we touch on that point for a moment when Donna is talking about the violence that we are having. We just experienced the horrible news in the United States about the mass shooting in the school. And all the news have been about gun control. And very little news have talked about mental health. We are not justifying the action of this young man going in and killing all these innocent children and teachers and his grandmother. But yes, we have to recognize that there was a serious mental health behind it. And that if the system would have been there, if the knowledge would have been there to prevent it, I think that we could have saved a lot of lives. So Finty, in her delivery and her statements and her testimonies in the film, on a regular basis has talked about prevention. This is one of the big things in the film that we want to bring forward. We have several versions of the film, and one of them is the international version, where we have a scene in Brazil where a school participated because they had lost 2 lives to suicide within a period of 2 weeks. The reason that they participated in the film was to inspire others not to have to be reactive, but to be proactive. And I think that's extremely important in everything that we do. So this is the goal. This is the goal of everything that we are talking about. How can we prevent violence? How can we prevent things going to a point that there's no return? And what can we do about it? So for me, answering to Micaela, why making the film, in a way was having been doing films about social issues and human rights for so many years. When I learned about the statistics of anxiety and depression and the high rates of suicide among youth, I felt that as having the medium to support them was something that I needed to look into it. And I felt responsible for it. How could I not do something about it if I have the means? It has been a very difficult documentary for me to make. I honestly felt that I had done child traffic and domestic violence and very different topics in my journey. But this one was particularly difficult because there's a lot of self-reflection. There's a lot of difficulty. I'm not a mental health professional, and I talked to more than 300 young people from around the world, taking all the stories over the visual diaries that we have in the film on a regular basis. Was not an easy task. It took me a long time to recuperate from all of the comments and the stories and what people were going through. So that's why I'm so proud when I see how each one of the film participants have come out of that darkness, have come out of that really big, obscure place that they felt they were in, and they are succeeding now, and they are able to bring their stories to life. So that's what we are doing with the film right now, trying to open up the conversations and create the impact that the film deserves in response and in honor, really, everyone who participated in the film, because I don't take it for granted that they share their stories. And Angel, with her music, she continues to put her music out, and it's just beautiful to see the transformation. So I'm so pleased.
I think for me, getting involved in the film, each of us, if we go out and we buy something in the store, there's a label on it and it has the content, it has information. If we buy a product, it comes with an owner's manual. But each of us as human beings, we don't come into this world with an owner's manual. We don't come in with a set of instructions about how to live our life. And then as a parent of two children, I didn't get an owner's manual or any kind of instruction manual on how to raise my children. And as parents, we do the best we can. And both my children now, my son's 30 and my daughter's going to be 28 this year. They turned out okay in spite of me as their parent. But we don't have that kind of information. So getting involved with the film and helping to bring this message, and particularly the voices of Angel and Finty and the other youth that were in the film, just makes it so powerful as a parent to understand a perspective. I remember being with my children in the car and just being quiet when they were there with their friends, because then for the first time they could actually hear them talking about what's on their mind, because they wouldn't necessarily want to share with me what they were experiencing. And so I just really appreciate Angel and Finty and the voice stories you brought to the film.
Thank you. And I actually want to say that, like, I think education about this has also helped me to understand that my parents are growing as well. I think when you reach a certain age, you realize that regardless, that maybe it wasn't your fault if something, like, maybe she didn't mean that. For me, I had a struggle with my parents, right? And certain things, I'm like, maybe she didn't mean that she hated me. She was just sometimes she can get very anxious, and it was projecting. And because her generation did not have a lot of knowledge about it, she would just she didn't have a toolkit. It was very clear that a lot of people at that time did not have a toolkit. And it helped me to not internalize it as a child, like as a daughter. And I like that. Even I told you that how much I appreciate adults talking about it, but it actually helps me for us to both be able to communicate our feelings. I feel like it creates a better relationship, and it makes it easier to grow up and realize that your parents are still growing and they have their own struggles as well. But I think the disconnect was when it wasn't being communicated. So I can handle as a like daughter that my parents might be struggling with something, but if it's not communicated, the impact that parents have on a child is so heavy. And if it's not communicated, then I'm thinking that it has something to do with me. So that has been a big shift as well. I don't know I'm curious to know if you've noticed that, if you've started talking and you've noticed maybe a shift. I'm curious to know.
You're asking me?
Yeah, I'm curious to know if you noticed a shift since maybe talking about those things or communication wise.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly has helped that as my kids have gotten older and they've been able to develop their own perspective on what it's like to be an adult. But for me, it's about trying to create a safe space for my kids to be able to share what's on their mind and what they're feeling.
I can tell you it's incredibly hard. And I struggle with this stuff every day. Every single day I struggle with parenting, and my kids have had their struggles. We have, all those layers that I was talking about in terms of experiencing genetics, trauma, COVID, adolescence, and having the language to talk about it helps. But I can tell you, it doesn't necessarily prevent issues from coming up. But what it does is it enables people to talk about it more. And, I have had, my children have asked for help. And it's a struggle. It is incredibly hard to be a parent. And, we're coming into that, but it's hard. And I also wanted to pass along another tool that Angel, you reminded me of when you were talking about, some days you just, getting out of bed and washing that dish. There's Jane McGonigal has a TED Talk, and she called Super Better. I think it's Super Better. And she has a book called Super Better. And she was a video game designer, and she had a traumatic brain injury where she literally couldn't get out of bed and couldn't do anything that she liked, and became suicidal, and sort of decided that she was either going to end her life or she was going to create a video game out of her experience. And she couldn't do video games, but she basically took everything she knew about video games and applied it to her life, and has sort of a formula for how to do that called Super Better. And it's great because it's, forming allies and forming, everything to do with video game design, but within real life. What are the things that you can do? So that's a really great resource. Her YouTube video is great.
Wonderful. And I see that the link was put in the chat. So thank you, Donna, for sharing that. Unfortunately, it is 12:15, 12:16 now on my time. And we are going to go to our closing. But this has been phenomenal. I want to thank all the panelists and everyone for participating in the chat and being very engaged. There are still some questions around, hope and what do you think needs to change? And we've touched on that a lot, but I think as a bit of a call to action, I would encourage you all, among the other calls to action that we had chatted about today, to keep considering about the things that need to change. What gives you hope? And there is that after conversation where those conversations can continue to be asked. And to be pondered about. So I will pause there and pass it back to Jim for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Michaela. Thank you all. This has been just splendid. And I want to just acknowledge and thank each of you for the contributions you've made. And I've been thinking, Nomi, about the timing of this film in relationship to the larger repression in almost every culture about mental and psychological and emotional dis-ease, for want of a better word. And I think, one of the services, in a highly ironic way, that COVID has made to our world is it stripped it all away and forced all of us to recognize that, yeah, we're all having mental issues here. We're all having psychological issues, just coping, so that the timing of your documentary could not be more synchronistic in a world that is finally having the courage to recognize that, we've got a problem, Houston. And the problem is getting worse, and the problem is global, and the problem is not going away. So I just wanted to bring that in as a comment, and I don't know whether you have any of you have any reflections on this, but it's like the documentary took the Band-Aid off.
Yeah, well, thank you, Jim. When I started to do research and I was speaking to young people and professionals in different parts of the world, and particularly with the young people the stories were so similar, that's what led me to take a global approach. A lot of my films are global, but this one particular for me was so similar in what they were going, independently of their culture, their language, where they were coming from, their background, socioeconomic, it did not matter. There was a commonality to all, that we're all suffering and they were not okay. And that's what led me to take a global look at the situation, which was a very big undertaking. But I think it was worth it. And yes, maybe it was meant to be like this. You never know when you're in the process, but that's what, when I talk about the good of adversity, somehow it was timely, and the pandemic brought us into the world at a time that the world needs it. And that's what my work has been all along for the last over 20 years, serving through these documentaries. So hopefully we can continue to create impact. Hopefully we can continue to see implementation of changes coming into communities globally. And I believe that back to connecting is community, is these type of talks that will make a difference, is putting hearts and minds together that are going to make a difference.
Yeah.
Jim, you said something so important that I had always, it was a big discussion actually, the stripping back. And I think life is so busy, and a lot of people, if we can distract ourselves from maybe the painful things that we don't want to face, it's so easy. But we were finally, and at the same time as in the entire world, we were forced to pause and forced really, it was a pause. And even some of the things that maybe are hard to look at, it reminds me of a burn. If there's heat in your skin, it's the sizzling of it coming out. It hurts when it's coming out, but it has to. And it feels so much better when it's out. But we were just avoiding it. And that standstill was so important. I'm so happy you touched on that. And I think also the fact that Noemi took the time to go take this conversation global. It's a nice theory. Everyone says like, oh yes, it's going on around the world, but she actually took the time to see and make the connection in these different countries. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah. We forget, but it's worth just noting that something unprecedented in all of human history happened in the last 2 years. It's the first time when everybody everywhere was confronted with the same challenge. It's the first time in recorded history where everybody was in lockdown. It's like a trauma happened, and our collective global response was to send everybody to their room. And in our room, we looked and we thought, whoa, this isn't a very pretty picture here. We got some issues that we have to deal with. So thank you, Angel, for affirming that, because we've all been through a real trauma, not only COVID, but lockdown, social distancing, wearing masks. We're social beings, and we were forced to our opposite. And all of a sudden we began to realize we're not coping very well. And the young people were taking the hit harder than the adults generally. And Nomi, your film, and Tom, as a producer, you guys brought into our collective awareness something extremely important. So I just want to acknowledge that as we round out this discussion. But before we go, I just want to turn to you, Michaela. You're the one person, you've been moderating splendidly, but I would love to just hear from you as a young person. How did you, through your experiences, how did you really come into really focusing on empowering your peers with mental and psychological challenges the way that you have? Would love to hear that story.
That's a great question. Thanks for asking, Jim. I would say that for me, growing up, I had been through some challenges myself and was accessing the mental health system. And I had noticed that there were just challenges in receiving care. There was long wait lists. There were, once you got to see someone, it wasn't always a match. The therapist was doing the best that they could, but maybe it was a modality, for instance, that wasn't resonating. Maybe there wasn't enough, of a spiritual component, or it just wasn't integrated. And I began to kind of realize these things and slowly find my voice in trying to express that. But it was really hard. And I was lucky that I had people in my life who encouraged me to use the voice that I had to try and make change. So I continued to try and harness that. And that really propelled me into being an advocate for having young people and caregivers at the table where conversations or decisions are being made. Because at the end of the day, who knows stuff better than the people who are living it day in and day out? And that's not to say that, if it's a group of researchers around the table, that's not, top-notch knowledge. Of course it is. Those folks are going to school, they're researching, they're taking the time. But just as that's its own form of critical knowledge, it's just as critical to have those people who are actually experiencing it and going through something. So I think that engagement of young people is so important, which is why, I really loved the film Connecting the Dots. I've been a long time fan, and this event too, seeing, youth and caregivers and just a wide range of people being able to use their voice to shed light on a crisis is, I think, very important. So that's how I came to get involved, and thanks for asking, Jim.
Sure. And then before we close, Michaela, just give us a heads up once again on what's going to take place tomorrow.
Absolutely. So another session you're not going to want to miss. Tomorrow's topic is all about belonging and community. It's all about creating those safe spaces. And just a bit of context, you can find out more online, but we have a very high need for belonging and community as humans. We all need to feel safe, which requires that we be seen, that we're heard, that we're appreciated, and we need a connection to something larger than ourselves. So the new science on parenting for health and lifelong thriving reveals the power of spirituality. So there's that very clear scientific link. And to learn more about what that actually is, definitely tune in tomorrow. We'll be joined by Dr. Lisa Miller, who is a New York Times bestselling author of The Spiritual Child and her #1 bestseller, The Awakened Brain. Dr. Miller is a clinical psychologist. She's a professor at clinical psychologist program at Teachers College, Columbia University, as well as many other very impressive distinctions. So you are not going to want to miss this, and we hope to see you back tomorrow for similar conversations about very important topics.
Thank you, Michaela.
Jim, I just want to thank everybody, if I may. I'm sorry for writing in. I'm always with the director's hat, and I think that I can butt in any moment. So sorry about that.
With pleasure.
But before we close, I just wanted to invite the audience to join us in bringing the film to their community, to host a screening in their community, to open up the conversations. We had partnered with UNICEF to create facilitators guides for every target group that we talked about today, from youth, to parents, to teachers, to community at large, and to mental health professionals as well. So please visit us at the film's website, connectingthedotsfilm.com. Reach out to us with Connecting the Dots to see how we can help you to bring the film into your community, to host a screening and open up the discussion so we together can make a difference. And I wanted to take this opportunity to thank Donna for being part of this. It was wonderful to share this conversation this morning with you, Donna, and hopefully many more to come. To Angel and Finty, my true pleasure to have you with me, and let's continue the conversation. We'll see you on Friday when we wrap up the week and we talk about what we learned through this exciting week of conversations. Jim, thank you for opening up the space. And Tom, of course, thank you for your continued support. And Michaela, you've done a great job today, so we look forward to seeing you again in the next panels. Thank you all, and thank you to the audience who joined us today.
Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you guys on Friday on the 10th. And yeah, thank you for an amazing, stimulating, educational conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, everyone.
Tom, any last word?
Thank you, Jim.
That was short and sweet. Yeah, thank you, Tom. Nomi, you produced a real masterpiece with this film in a very synchronistic way for our time. And so I want to acknowledge that and encourage all of you to go to the website, watch the film if you can this week while we're having this extraordinary conversation with many of the people who are actually in the film on Humanity Rising. You're all welcome to the after session chat group, those of you who can make it. The chat is in the chat box. We'll see you, all of you, hopefully again here tomorrow, same time, same station here on Humanity Rising. Thank you all so much. Bye for now.
Thank you.